listening to episode 178 of Mitolife Radio. I'm Matt Blackburn, and today I'm interviewing Gan Sasaki. I met Gan several years ago when I was attending a natural products expo in California, and we really hit it off talking about enzyme therapy, and specifically systemic enzymes. Gan's professional official title is he's the Director of Business Development for a laboratory asset management provider in life science and the biopharmaceutical industry. He really knows his stuff about enzymes, whether it be systemic enzymes, digestive enzymes, and even spore-forming organisms, sometimes called spore-based probiotics, which he also talks about in this interview. So Gan talks about fibrin, fibrinogen, what makes up scar tissue, why systemic enzymes have to be enteric coated, and why you should take them on an empty stomach. I asked Gan about the snake venom myth that I heard several years ago in the raw vegan community. Then if you get bit by a venomous snake, you could just megadose enzymes and neutralize the venom. So I asked his opinion on that. So whether you're taking digestive enzymes, systemic enzymes, or spore-based probiotics, this is an interesting interview to listen to. Here is Gan Sasaki. All right, we are here with Gan Sasaki. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to see you again. It's been several years. I don't know how many. We saw each other last at the Natural Products Expo West and really hit it off talking about enzyme therapy. Really love your passion for that. And I was wondering how long have you been researching enzymes, and how did you even get into it?
Well, I've been studying enzymes since I started studying enzymes when I was at the University of Tennessee. I was in the cancer research back then. And that's how I came to know about enzymes. And then fast forward, 25 years, and then here I am today. I was working for another company that produced enzymes, and I relearned more about enzymes and probiotics. So with the basics in life science, and then I relearned everything. Everything from the science of enzymes, the up-to-date science of enzymes, to sales and distribution of enzymes, and manufacturing, of course.
At the University of Tennessee, when you were researching cancer, did they talk about, or did you learn about, like, say, systemic enzymes?
Well, enzymes in general, and I know what it is, and and people talk about enzymes like it's a magic bullet, but it's really just the catalyst of something that helps reaction take place. So none of us would be in here where we are today on Earth without enzymes. No reaction can happen without enzymes, and if they did happen, then that would be kind of scary. It's, if you hold it like a match in front of you, it doesn't spontaneously combust, right? Because in order for that reaction, the combustion to take place, it has to go over this certain amount of energy to initiate that reaction. And then once the energy, you go over that hump of energy, then it's then the combustion starts, right? So same thing happens in your body with enzymes. You have enzymes, and that help reactions in the body. Your body just doesn't, start digesting food all by itself. Your body just does not use the chemical reactions to, like growth, for example. That a child cannot grow without enzymes, because the reactions just don't happen. So you add enzymes to the formula, all these reactions, and then all these magical chemical reactions start to happen, and then that's when you are able to digest food properly, when you are able to incorporate those nutrients into your body, so children can grow. So that's what enzymes are, and that's what I've been studying.
That's great. Yeah,
I hope that
I
makes
was.
sense.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I was raw vegan for I think it was 3 years. I was mostly fruitarian, just eating, you know, 10, 20, 30 bananas a day and just boxes of oranges and dates. And while I was doing that experiment, I was working at a juvenile detention facility for children that were, that did crimes or whatever. And my favorite, my favorite thing was science class because I'd bring in these cool videos to show the kids, and uh, I think everyone remembers seeing that digestion one, right, where they stick a camera down someone's intestinal tract and they're showing kind of like the bile squirting out, and it looks super gross, right?
No,
but
it didn't look gross to me. When I saw that, I thought it was cool.
that's kind of what got me
But
kind of
yeah,
thinking.
but
Yeah, good.
it's same thing with me. So if you talk about like science projects like that, then my interest in enzymes and science goes all the way back to like when I was probably in the first grade. My older sister bought me this book of medicine. How human body works. So that's when I first got into all these reactions that are taking place in the body. How people grow and how the hair grows and the nails grow, and then why we have hair and nails and things like that. So yes, it goes back for decades. My interest in science like this.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, and uh, one of the reasons why I brought up that my raw vegan experiment is the argument that a lot of raw foodists make, whether they're eating raw meat or raw fruits and vegetables. There's kind of both camps right now in the dietary extremes. They both make the argument that when we cook our food, it kills the enzymes. Is there truth to that?
Well, it is true because enzymes are proteins, and if you heat up the proteins, they break down. And I have heard of this the argument before. Raw foodologists they they make that argument, but I don't necessarily agree with that. Yes, it is true that in wild animals don't cook food. They just eat it. That's true, but human bodies and wild animals too. They have enzymes that actually digest food that they eat. So there may be some enzymes that help with the decomposition of the food, but I'm not too worried about destroying them. Um, for one thing, you produce enzymes, and then in like these days, you have very good enzymes like supplements to help with the digestions if you need those things. And I'm one of those people. I do take digestive enzymes every day. So I'm not too worried about eating food raw. On the other hand, I think you should enjoy your food. You should not punish yourself by eating something that is not as tasty. When you eat this food. Now, if you like raw food, great. Keep doing it. Why stop doing it if you like it? Great. But for most people, they enjoy the taste of the food. And then in order to make that happen, you have to cook it somehow, right? So I would not worry too much about it. And I think it's just a drop in the bucket. This enzymes found naturally in the food that helps with the decomposition. I think it's just a drop in the bucket compared to what your body can produce and what you can take as a supplement.
Yeah, I agree with that because there's different types, right? And what we're talking about here would be the digestive type, right? That our pancreas makes.
Pancreas and many other organs, yes.
Hmm.
Like
And
your,
then we,
your mouth produces some enzymes too.
yeah, it's mostly amylase, right, to digest carbohydrates.
Correct. And there's an interesting side story about that. Like when you eat rice, for example, or potatoes, the more you chew, the sweeter it gets because it increases glucose, the production of glucose from the food, the starch that you eat. So that's I read about that. We talked about how we started the getting interested in enzymes, but I read that in that little book that my older sister gave me when I was in the first grade. And I thought, wow, this is very, very interesting. So this is why you chew. It's sort of like it's interesting because it's nature's way of, telling people to chew food properly. And then, maybe we'll cover this later in this podcast, but, the more uh, the more you chew the food, the smaller the food particle becomes, and it becomes easier for your stomach and the small intestine to keep digesting that food that you're swallowing.
I've heard that about liquids even too, that you should chew your liquids, whether you're drinking milk or a smoothie, that if you just gulp it down without, swishing it around for a few seconds or whatever, makes a difference.
It might help, but like I said, the amount of the like amylase that your mouth produces, it's probably not that much compared to what your large intestine can do. Large intestines are very, very long. I'm sorry, I keep saying large intestine, small intestine. Small intestines is very, very long, and it helps with the digestion of the fat, and then sugar. So yeah, it's good if you enjoy it, and it's again, if you squish it in your mouth, that sweet stuff in your mouth, it's probably more enjoy. You can enjoy your food more that way.
Have you ever heard of the story of Beaumont? His name was William Beaumont, 1822. Basically, there was like a man that was shot in the abdomen, and it left like a huge hole there, and it didn't close up. And so this surgeon Beaumont decided to experiment on the man, because supposedly he was willing, and he would like have him eat different foods and then watch how long, like the transit time, like how long it took to go through and how well it digested. And it was a pretty gruesome experiment. But I think going back to the cooked versus raw food, I think some cooked food digested faster than the raw food. So it's just curious if you'd ever heard that story.
No, but are you saying that they were able to see inside his stomach?
Yeah. Hmm. In real
I
time.
saw something like that. I saw something like that when I was at Louisiana State University. They have a very good dairy program there, and they have an actual dairy farm out there. And back then they had a cow with a little window on the side of the stomach, and you can actually look into the stomach of the cow. The cow has like 4 different stomachs, and then you can actually open up this window and then take out what's inside those stomachs, and then you can see how the cow actually digests the hay that they eat, which was very, very interesting. But no, I don't know about this story that you just told me about.
Yeah, I have 3 goats here. I think I've told you, and it's so interesting to just see them kind of regurgitate their grass or their alfalfa, and then chew
Mhm.
that cud, and then just back and forth. Their digestive system's so interesting.
It's amazing how nature works. Yeah,
um, so I wanted to
but
break down the
that's
different.
kind of
Oh, go ahead.
understandable because
Sorry, go ahead. Go.
that's understandable because it takes time to digest grass. I can imagine that. And then I don't think it's the goat or cow that's actually digesting the grass. It's the microorganisms living in their stomach that's digesting the grass. So it takes a lot of time, and that's why for cows they have 4 stomach. I'm not sure about goats. They have multiple stomach, so that it goes down, and then you regurgitate, and then they chew again, and then they swallow again, and they regurgitate again and chew again. So it's a cooperation between them and microorganisms. It's the nature is like really, really interesting in that sense.
I'm glad you said that. That's a good point. Yeah, the woman that I bought these goats from, she told me, she was educating me about goat care, and she said always give them access to sodium bicarbonate, baking soda. Just let them free graze on baking soda, She said because they use that to soothe their rumen. If they're experiencing digestive upset, they'll just lick some baking soda and it calms their rumen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. I don't know how that works, but the bicarbonate is something that you produce. Humans produce. It's produced and released into a duodenum, which is just after stomach, and that is used to increase the pH level of chyme, which is the half digested food from stomach. So I don't know how that works, but yeah, if it works, yeah, why not?
So we kind of covered digestive enzymes a little bit. Are the other, would you say there's three main categories, like digestive, metabolic, and systemic?
Well, the products that we used to sell are digestive enzymes and systemic enzymes. Those are the two major products that I studied. And digestive we just covered, and systemic is the one that works on fibrin buildup. So fibrin, causes a lot of problems if it's unchecked. So it's normal to have fibrin. So when you cut yourself, for example, okay, your body tries to repair it, and then fibrin plays a very, very critical role in fixing your injury. But if it goes unchecked and if it becomes chronic, that's a problem because it won't go away. In fact, it makes the situation even worse, the presence of fibrin. So the ones that we used to produce, yeah, one is digestive, and then the other one is systemic.
And why would fibrin go chronic and not break down? Like, what do you know the mechanism that the body is it just excess inflammation and the body can't catch up or something, or?
Kind of, yes. So, when you have injury, so for example, if you're a smoker, okay, the smoke nicotine gets into the circulation and it really damages the lining of the blood vessels. And as you can imagine, blood vessels, especially the inside of the blood vessels, they're very, very sensitive, And then if it, something like nicotine can cause micro lesions along the blood vessels. So what happens with that is that your body needs to repair it, right? So what the body, like a platelets come along, try to form the barrier, and then fibrinogen, which is always circulating in your body, which is a precursor to fibrin. It comes along and it tries to form a barrier over this micro lesion so that it can be repaired while your blood flows over it. So it sort of isolates that micro lesion from the flow of the blood, if that makes sense. And then after the repair, okay, after this under the cover of fibrin, very thin fibrin, something called the what was that? Plasminogen comes along, and then plasminogen is activated and becomes plasmin, which is a natural enzyme that your body produces that melts fibrin. That fibrin that was protecting the repair area, the barrier. So plasmin comes along and then digests that barrier and then removes it, right? So so you can go back to the normal blood vessel, if that makes sense. Now, what happens with the chronic case is that plasmin cannot do that. And then, as you can imagine, this is a very, very complex process. And then, if something goes wrong, and then if plasmin cannot keep up with this removal of the barrier, fibrin barrier, what happens is that fibrin barrier starts to catch some of the debris circulating in the blood, right? Blood is not just liquid. There are a lot of solid materials circulating in the blood, right? We all know about like red blood cells. that carries oxygen to various parts of the body, right? We know about white blood cells. We know about platelets. We know about all these different things like circulating in the blood, right? Those are solid matters. And then there's also fat that's circulating in the circulation. There's nicotine circulating in the bloodstream, right? All these things can get caught in this fibrin barrier, which has like sort of like a lattice-like structure. And then it catches those things, and then it starts to build on top of each other. And, the end result is what we commonly call a plaque, right? And then plaque eventually either blocks the blood vessels, which is not good, or it sort of sloughs off. The force of the blood circulation forces some of this plaque to come off, and then it's carried to another part of the circulation where it can block the small blood vessels, right? So, when platelet cannot keep up with something like that, and then it just becomes chronic, and then it causes more inflammations, and then, the end result is not good. And that's when you start to take systemic enzymes, which helps with the, plasmin, dissolve all these chronic inflammations, chronic buildup of fibrin.
That was an awesome explanation. Thanks for that. So you're saying that systemic enzymes can kind of act as a plasmin surrogate or a replacement if plasmin isn't keeping up?
It helps, yes, definitely. So a couple of very, well-known systemic enzymes. Number one is serrapeptase. That's very well known and well studied. There's another one called the nattokinase, which is also very well known and well studied. And then there are a couple of other things that sometimes people talk about, but those are the two enzymes that I'm most familiar with: serrapeptase and nattokinase.
Yeah, there's lumbrokinase. I think Mercola sells that.
I'm not too crazy about that, but yes, I didn't want to mention it, but yes, lumbrokinase is another one. And that one comes from earthworm.
Right.
Earthworm. Yeah.
Interesting. And you don't think that one's as effective as the serrapeptase and nattokinase?
Well, the thing is, it may be effective, but it's not as well studied as nattokinase or serrapeptase. Those two are well studied. A lot of people have studied it, and then they have shown the effectiveness of those couple of enzymes. So, I'm quite happy with that. I personally take those things. I used to take those every day, one capsule every day. At its peak, I used to take 2 capsules every day because I had this back pain. And then, it took me a few years, but the back pain subsided, and then I reduced the amount to 1 capsule. At one point, I even stopped it, but the back pain came back. So I started taking just 1 capsules, and that's why I am right now. Just 1 capsule a day, and it's keeping. I don't feel the pain anymore on my back. And it's very good. It's very effective. Lumbrokinase, I'm not sure. I've never tried it, but when you Google, you'll notice the difference in the amount of study that is available out there. And like I said, if it works for you, great, stick with it. I know it's out there. A lot of companies are selling lumbrokinase, so if it's working great for you, stick with it. It's just that my personal preference is serrapeptase and nattokinase. That's all.
That's great. Yeah, when I moved here from California to Idaho, my neighbor told me that he was experiencing fibromyalgia, and I said, "Hey, I sell systemic enzymes. I think this would help you out." And so I just started giving him bottles, and he had a 90% reduction in pain. He told me in like a week or two. Like, it was very quick. And he had this for years, where his hands would just lock up, and pretty quick turnaround. It's pretty cool.
Yes, it's amazing what these things can do.
Because fibromyalgia, that's like a fibrin buildup disease, right?
Yes, it's just a fibrin buildup, different parts of the body. So that's exactly what the systemic enzymes can do. And then, serrapeptase, nattokinase, lumbrokinase, What happens is that, just as I explained a little bit earlier, they go in and then just remove the excess buildup of the fibrin that your body couldn't remove, which is plasmin. Your plasmin just couldn't keep up with the fibrin buildup. And then, that's when you take systemic enzymes. My understanding is that, this buildup of fibrin, it just sort of pinches the nerve endings, and that's why you feel the pain. But, by reducing that buildup, it reduces the pressure on the nerve endings, and that's how you remove the pressure, which is much, much better than, taking some of these Western medications. Western medications, they just sort of cover up the pain. So the pain is still there, but you just sort of make yourself numb so that you don't feel it, but your body is actually screaming out, for help. Whereas the enzymes, yes, it does take time, but, it's actually addressing the root cause of the pain. So just like I told you, I had this back pain. I slipped on this concrete floor many, many years ago. Probably by now, it's probably like 12 years ago. I slipped on the concrete floor. And then for 7 years, I had this pain on the back, this sciatic pain running down my leg for 7 years. And then I started taking systemic enzymes, serrapeptase and nattokinase, 1 capsule each. So 2 capsules a day. And then I did that every single day. And then it took me about a year for the pain to, go away to the point that I was not really bothered. And then it took me probably another 1 year for the pain to, go almost completely away. If I were to come up with a number, I'd say about 99% gone. And then I just kept taking these capsules, for following few years. And then now it's been like what, 5 years now, I think. But the pain is now completely gone. I couldn't sleep on the right side of my body because it would start, giving me a pain after like few minutes. But now I can just sleep all night on my right side of the body, and then it's still okay. Now, is it completely gone? No, actually, it's still there. But if I didn't know that I had this pain before, I probably wouldn't even notice it. It's that small. So it actually works, and I'm pretty sure it works the same way with fibromyalgia. It's just fibrin buildup all over the body, and then the great thing about the systemic enzymes is that it travels in your blood, so it goes everywhere in your body, wherever the pain is. It helps with the pain. Now, when there's a pain in your body, certain chemicals, cytokines, are released by the cells in the body where the pain is. And this, there are many, many different kind of cytokines, which are signaling system. And then, one of them causes the bloodstream to be porous. So what happens is that, when the systemic enzymes get to that point where the bloodstream is slightly more porous than the rest of the body, it's easier for the systemic enzymes to get out, right, into the tissue where this fibromyalgia is happening. And then it just starts to reduce that fibrin buildup. And then, the broken up fibrin is carried away in your bloodstream, and then it's expelled from your body. So it takes time. You have to be patient, but, it eventually resolves the pain. So like I said, it may take a couple of years, 3 years, but, it will eventually go away. And then it's so much better than some of the painkillers of the Western, medicine, which just, number one, covers up the pain when they're not addressing the root cause, and number two, it can be addictive. Whereas
Yeah,
the enzymes, it's not addictive at all.
yeah. When I used to be in the teaching field, I would see all these older teachers getting implants, like rods in their back or their legs, or just like having things put in them because
Mm-hmm.
they're breaking down. And I think back then I knew about enzyme therapy, and they just would not listen, and they were just they get scared into that path by their doctor. right? Because it's just the authority figure. And I've never heard of enzyme therapy, so it can't be effective,
Well, back then, I'm not sure. A lot of doctors, they were trained, to like prescribe drugs, certain drugs for pain, and then certain other drugs for other things. So that's what they're trained, and I guess they were just following their training. But nowadays, a lot of Western doctors, they're open to the idea of alternative medicine. And then, if you have a doctor and then if you have a pain, you might as well speak with them and ask, what they have to say. And then great thing about systemic enzymes, you can just buy it. You can buy it on, from you, number one, Mitolife. But, another things, you can also buy on Amazon. You can just buy it without prescription. And then, I'd say just give it a try.
Are there contraindications like with people on pharmaceuticals? Because I know certain supplements they could break down. Like one I sell, Shilajit, a resin from Russia that contains fulvic acid that can potentiate or amplify the effects of pharmaceutical drugs, which can be very dangerous. And so I was wondering if there's anything like that with systemic enzymes, where does it just break down fibrin, or can it also break down like pharmaceuticals?
Well, great thing about enzymes is that they are very, very specific to certain substrates. So, the chances of them breaking down something is very, very minimal. I wouldn't worry about that. Now, one thing I would caution you is that if you're taking some sort of a blood thinner, like warfarin, for example, I would be cautious about using something like nattokinase, which is a very, very powerful fibrinogen. So, you don't want to over thin your blood. So if you're already taking blood thinner, warfarin, for example, I would ask your doctor, and then I would, be cautious not to overtake it. So here's a story, that I can tell you. I'm a very, very healthy person, right? Other than for that pain that I had, I'm a very, very healthy person. And then one day I was just trying to grab some, like a dish from the in the kitchen, right? And I ended up hitting my finger, the back of my finger, against this cupboard, right? It's a sharp corner. And then I just nicked myself. And at that time, I was taking, at that time I was increasing my dosage a little bit. So, I was taking like a nattokinase, and I was taking serrapeptase. And I think I was also taking a stronger version of serrapeptase we had, which had 130K SPU, so which is pretty strong serrapeptase. So I was taking that, and then, and then I had this little nick on my finger. And then normally what happens is that little tiny nick, the blood would clot and stop bleeding after like a couple of minutes, right? And then after an hour, I wouldn't even think about it. What happens at that point was that, my little tiny nick kept oozing, and then little tiny blood kept coming out. Even the following day, I had the little bandage on. I removed the bandage the following day, and it was still oozing, right? So I figured it was because of the nattokinase and its blood thinning effect. It reduces the fibrin inside the blood, right? So it makes it difficult for your body to repair that little tiny, tiny damage that I had on my finger. So, it kept bleeding. And then, after 2 days, I thought I should just stop taking nattokinase. And then when I stopped taking nattokinase, I guess it took another couple of days for the nattokinase in the system to completely clear out. But after a couple of days, yes, it did finally stop, oozing. It's not bleeding, but it was just oozing a little tiny bit of blood. But it finally stopped. So yes, it's very effective. So I would just be careful about that. If you're going to combine this with some sort of a Western medication, I would consult the doctor first. But that's just my personal story about the blood not clotting properly.
Interesting. Yeah, I know the clotting factors. I think they're partially dependent on vitamin K2, but I think there are also other nutrients
Yes.
involved with that. And
Mhm.
you said it took a few days for nattokinase to completely leave the body. Do we know how long serrapeptase and nattokinase generally circulate? Because it was my understanding it's like 6 to 12 hours, but it sounds like it could be 24 or 48.
Well, it's not like, they suddenly go out. There's something called half-life, and then, it just sort of diminishes slowly. And then, it's not like, after 6 hours, everything suddenly goes out of your system. It just goes out system slowly at a time. And then probably like 6 hours sounds more like, that's when the amount of, these enzymes circulate in the, I'm sorry, that's the amount that is still remaining in your circulation. So, every 6 hours, it goes down by half. So it still takes like, a couple of days for the entire, well, almost entire, enzymes to be cleared. And that's another reason why you should take enzymes every day if you want to have the benefit of enzymes.
Hmm. Yeah, and I like that you said you just took one or two, because I often start my day with 3 to 6 capsules of systemic enzymes. But I guess I'm doing it for the
Mhm.
anti-aging. Hopefully, I don't cut myself accidentally. But do you think there's a use for taking more? Because I've heard that with specific conditions, if you want faster results, you can just take more, and instead of waiting a year, maybe it's just 3 months to.
Sure. If you want to have the faster effect, yes, definitely. So I'll just give you, myself as an example. So I had my back pain, right? So at the beginning, I was taking quite a bit, just to see, how it goes. And then as the pain started to subside, I was kind of happy with the progress. So I started reducing the amount. Remember, the more capsules you take, the more money you have to pay for these capsules. So, you don't want to take more than necessary, right? So, yes, you just have to listen to your body. So by that, I'm, just watch the signs that your body is giving. So the blood oozing from my finger is a good sign that, I was maybe taking too much capsules. So that's why I decided to reduce the capsules. If the blood is not clotting on the surface, it was a good thing that, little tiny nick happened when it did happen, because, I was able to see for myself on the surface that, the blood was not clotting and the repair was not being properly done, on the surface. But, same thing happens with the example that I gave earlier about nicotine, circulating in the body that's causing micro lesions in your body. If the body is not repairing itself on the surface, the same thing is happening inside your body, right? So anytime you see something like this, yeah, try to think about, what's going on, and then try to adjust the amount of enzymes that you're taking.
That's great. Gon, can you talk a little bit about why systemic enzymes are enteric coated? So it's this capsule that protects it from the low pH of the stomach acid, right?
Sure. Enteric coating, as the name implies, is something that protects the enzymes from the stomach acid. Enzymes are made of proteins, and one of the functions of the stomach is to digest proteins, right? And in order to do that, protein is kind of like a rolled up, a string. If you have like a long string and you just roll it up into a ball, that's what the protein looks like. It's a long string of amino acid molecules, and you roll them up. It just doesn't happen randomly. Actually, it follows the interactions among amino acids to fold into a proper shape. But just for the sake of argument, let's just take a string and roll it up into a ball. That's what the enzyme looks like, or any proteins look like. And what happens inside the stomach is that stomach acid, or hydrogen chloride, to be a little more specific, it breaks some of these bonds, that's holding this ball together. and it sort of unravels this ball into the original string, right? And that's when the digestive enzymes can come along and then eat up, because the enzymes, they need to come in contact with the substrate that it needs to work on. So, if it's a ball, then it can only work on the surface of the ball. But if it's a string, then it can work anywhere along that string. So it speeds up the digestion. Now, the problem with that is that, when you take something like systemic enzymes, which is a protein, it gets unraveled inside your stomach, right? So it's not a good thing. And then, a lot of times it even gets digested. So, it becomes nutrients. At this point, it's not going to function as the systemic enzymes anymore. It becomes your nutrient, right? And then it goes into your duodenum, which is just past the stomach. That's when the bicarbonate is introduced, and then that increases the pH, right? So by this time, your systemic enzymes has already been digested, so it's not functional anymore. And even if it did survive the digestion, it needs to come into the ball shape again. So it's not a good thing. So what you do, okay, what a lot of companies do is to protect the systemic enzymes by enteric coating. So it just coats the protein inside this something that protects it from the effect of acid. And then it can go into a duodenum where the pH increases. At that point, this coating comes off, releasing the systemic enzymes that is inside. So at this point, the pH is already, near neutral, right? So it doesn't, the protein doesn't get destroyed at that point, right? In duodenum after the stomach. And then systemic enzymes in its, original shape can be absorbed into your bloodstream from a small intestine, and then it can start circulating inside your body. So that is the importance of enteric coating systemic enzymes. It protects it from getting digested and ends up becoming a nutrient rather than systemic enzymes.
That was an awesome explanation. Yeah, it would be an expensive protein supplement, right? If you were to take them not in enteric coating.
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's great. Yeah, because a lot of people ask, I think in the Q&A or the questions that listeners sent in, they asked about giving it to their pets, like their cat or their dog. And I thought that I've read in studies that you can give systemic enzymes outside of enteric coating. They're just not as effective. Is that true, or are they completely ineffective?
Well, systemic enzymes, so like I said, it can be digested inside the stomach. That's why we recommend that you take systemic enzymes on the empty stomach. So what happens in the stomach is that, when you take these things on an empty stomach, when, there's nothing in the stomach with just water, right? Stomach does not sense anything that it needs to digest, and then it just puts the content of the stomach, it just pushes it out into the small intestine, right? With minimal exposure to the acid, the residual acid inside the stomach. So that's why we recommend that you take systemic enzymes with the on an empty stomach with nothing but water, not like orange juice, or some smoothies or something. Don't give stomach a chance to think about it and then tries to close up the other end of the stomach, and then think about it. Let the capsule. The systemic enzyme capsule float around in this acid and then eventually open up inside the capsules. Just take it with water on an empty stomach, and then don't eat anything for at least 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, but don't eat anything for that amount, so that your systemic enzymes is completely in the small intestine.
Oh, that's great. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I often tell people to take it. Or I take it first thing in the morning, right when I wake up. because half
Hmm.
hour isn't a long time to wait to eat breakfast. People can do that. It's not,
Right,
we're not talking
right.
about fasting.
What, what I do is I take it the first thing in the morning, and then I go about, the dairy, the morning routines, like take shower, for example, and then, by the time, I'm ready to eat something, which I don't. Actually, I don't eat breakfast, but sometimes when I'm hungry, I grab some snack in the morning. But by the time I eat that, then the capsule is already inside the small intestine. And then another thing I do, if I have to take it twice a day, I recommend, if you have to take systemic enzymes to fix something like a back pain for or fibromyalgia or anything else, right? Like pulmonary fibrosis, for example. Just I would recommend taking it 3 times a day to keep the level of enzymes circulating in the body consistent, because the fibrin buildup, the excess fibrin buildup is constant. It doesn't take a break. It's 24/7. Whenever there's a chance, this excess fibrin is gonna build up. So you want to keep the amount, the concentration of systemic enzymes circulating in the blood constant. So for that to happen, I recommend 3 times a day. But a lot of times, a lot of people working full time, and for many other reasons, you just cannot find 3 times a day when when you're hungry, when your stomach is empty. So in that case, just stick with 2 times a day. And that was the case with me. So in my case, I would take the first dose the first thing in the morning and go about the morning routine. And then, I would eat something if I wanted to. And then the second dose was just before I left the office. Now I work from home, so I don't have that. But, when I was working in the office, I would just take, systemic enzymes and then get into my car and start driving, and then when I'm driving, there's nothing else to do, right? I'm not eating when I'm driving. So it's perfect. By the time I get back home, I'm ready to eat, right? And then I'm sorry, you mentioned about pets in the previous question. And then, yes, with the pets, you have to probably give the systemic enzyme to food, like dogs, cats. Unless you're very, very good at, shoving this capsule down the throat, it's okay to just, put it in a small amount of food and then, give it to the dogs or cats or pets. One thing you might want to be careful is that, pets are typically very, very small compared to humans, right? So you don't want to take the entire thing, like an entire full capsule that you normally take, and then, give the whole thing to your pets. You might want to just, open up the capsules, which is very easy to do, and then just mix a small amount, like half, maybe a quarter, depending on the size of the pet, and then just mix it with a very, very small amount of, food, and then just, give it to the pet. Alternatively, you can probably mix it with some sort of a tasty smoothies or something, a very small amount. Just dissolve it. And then actually, I tried it myself, and enzymes, a lot of enzymes are quite tasty, and then if you just mix it with water, and not smoothie or anything, just water, they might even take it. So you might want to try that first. Just dissolve it in a small amount of water and then let your pet just, lick it up.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I wonder if just breaking digestive enzymes on their food too, on their wet food, would be a good idea. Because I think they add it to. I think I've seen them add a protease and stuff to pet food.
It helps, yes, definitely, and especially when the pet is older, they have trouble digesting food, just like humans. For humans, as early as like 25 years of age, you start to produce less enzymes, right? So, same thing with the pets. In fact, it probably happens sooner than that. But yes, when they're like 3, 4, or 5 years old, you may want to consider adding some digestive enzymes in the food. Some of my acquaintances do that. They take digestive enzymes, a capsule of digestive enzymes, and then just open up and then just, sprinkle just a little tiny bit. Don't add the whole thing, because that's for human-sized body. So just take the one capsule of digestive enzymes, sprinkle a little bit on the food, and then give it to your pets, and I'm pretty sure it helps.
That's great. Yeah. Let's see. I wanted to ask you, kind of going back to the science of systemic enzymes, and I'm just curious if you think this is accurate. I've heard it said that kind of the order of operations is irritation leads to inflammation, which then creates fibrosis. And I often talk about with people like iron overload, like iron excess in the tissues, which is a big problem with iron fortified cereals. And I grew up with all of that Honey Nut Cheerios and Lucky Charms that had a lot of iron in it, fortified. And that creates inflammation. Then you have calcification, right? Like calcium fortified and just excess calcium coming in. And there's all these other accumulations that I think lead to inflammation in the body. And my perspective is that fibrosis is like the end result of all of that inflammation. Would you say that's accurate? Like calcification basically could lead to fibrosis?
Well, everything in moderation, right? Everything in moderation, and then so you just don't want to take too much of anything. But irritation, when you say irritation, it can be a number of different things. Yes, irritation. What's causing irritations? Minor injuries that's happening. Yes, that's irritation. And then, which leads to inflammations, which is not a bad thing. That's just the body's normal reaction to fixing that irritation. So that's not a bad thing. And as I was, explaining earlier, that's when the fibrin comes along, fibrinogen comes along, and they start sticking with each other. And then that becomes fibrin, right? And then normally a plasmin comes along and then just, breaks up the fibrin buildup, and then, it becomes normal again. But when that becomes chronic, then it starts to, lead to the excess buildup of fibrin, which is not a good thing. So the calcium, you mentioned calcium. Yes, calcium is one of those things. It causes the hardening of the arteries, for example, right? That's the beginning part of the heart attack that some people have. And what happens is, like as I was telling you earlier, there's this lattice structure of fibrin, excess fibrin. It starts to trap things in the circulating in the bloodstream, and then calcium being one of them. And as you can imagine, calcium is what makes your bones, right? So, when the calcium starts to build up in this plaque, it becomes hardened, and then it causes all sorts of problems, leading to a heart attack, right? And then if something like that happens in the brain, then it's a stroke, right? So yes, the order of things, yes, it's true. That's pretty much correct. But that's the bad scenario. So what you want to do is to just take everything in the right amount. Don't take anything excessively. People say calcium is good for the bone growth. Yes, that's true. But if you take too much of that, it's not a good thing, right? And I'm not sure about irons, but many other minerals like that. You just take too much of it, and it's just not a good thing. So I've always been careful. I just try not to take too much of it. The best thing to do is to eat healthy. Eat vegetables, eat the proper amount of meat, and then everything is great. But what happens is with that, especially with the society these days, is that everybody's so busy, and then they just don't have time to prepare a meal properly, so you start taking the shortcuts, and then start eating a lot of processed food, which is rich in a lot of things that's not natural. The amount found naturally in the nature is what I should say. So it causes the imbalance in the nutrients and vitamins and minerals, and then it causes a lot of problems. So just be mindful of these things, and then try to eat healthy. I try not to eat like fast food, for example. It's just full of salt, and then it's just fat, for example, and it's just not good. But if you look around, you can still quote unquote cut corners, and then still try to be healthy. For example, like um, a lot of healthy food places, like salad bars, for example. You can try salad, for meals, and which is what I do. I travel a lot these days, so whenever I'm on the road, I intentionally try to find salad bars where I can eat salad. So try to make a little bit of lifestyle change like that, and then it should be fine. Another thing that I'm particularly fond of is Chinese food. They tend to make things from fresh ingredients, especially like those mom and pop store Chinese food. I went into this little Chinese restaurant near where I used to work, and then when I walked in there, a couple of people, like workers, clearly the owners of the place, they're just peeling this little green beans, and then they just do those instead of buying things like pre-made. They just actually prepare things from the raw ingredients. So I used to go to that Chinese restaurant very often. So you know you can cut corners and then still be healthy. But ideally, you should prepare your own food so you know exactly what you're eating. But like I said, a lot of people are too busy for that. Myself included. In that case, just try to be mindful, and then try to make some changes. For example, like I said, I travel a lot, so when I'm on the road, I eat salad for lunch and dinner, unless I'm with my clients, of course. So yeah, that's just an advice.
I love it. Yeah, I agree. God, have you ever been to the restaurant Shogun? I think there's another chain. It was my dad's birthday recently. We went, where they cook on the table there in front of you. I think it's like an Americanized,
Yeah,
Asian.
kind of like what was that? I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking. You're talking about teppan, right?
Yep.
So yes, I've been there many times. I wouldn't call that Japanese food because that's not really a traditional, like home style Japanese food. But yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And then yes, as you know, I am from Japan.
That's
But yeah,
all.
that's good. They have ingredients, and you know exactly what they put on your food, and then you can tell them to like go easy on salt. Or in my case, if I do go into like fast food, like once in a blue moon, when I order French fries, I tell them no salt on the French fries, and then a lot of times, these like burgers, they already have salt and sugar and everything already, on the burger. But if you go to a place like In-N-Out Burger, for example, you can just tell them, don't put salt on my burger, and then they won't put salt on the burger. So, it's a little things like this, but, it adds up.
Yeah.
But Shogun, yes, that, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of restaurants named Shogun. There was a TV show called Shogun, back in the 80s, and that was a huge thing.
I wonder if the excess salt is just creating a potassium deficiency, because I know sodium and potassium are on a seesaw together, and the nutrient relationships are so fascinating to me. Talking about enzymes, from what I'm researching, when the vitamin and mineral imbalance occurs, then we get basically these enzyme pathways shut down. For example, if you have like excess calcium and you create a magnesium deficiency, there's like 3,751 proteins that are magnesium dependent. So those can't function, those enzymes.
Right. So I'm not sure about the, how potassium and the sodium compete, or calcium and magnesium, how they compete. And then you're right, there are a lot of chemical reactions that involve all these minerals. And then, that wasn't the area of my study. But yes, I do realize that there are a lot of chemical reactions that require all these things: calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, many other things, iron, for example. Um, but like I said, everything is in moderation, right? So don't try to just take a lot of calcium or a lot of magnesium. A lot of times what happens is that like people read about these things on the internet, and then they read something like, hey, magnesium is good for this condition, and they just start taking like a lot of magnesium for that, and that might, yes, compete against the calcium, and then you might have a problem at some other places of your body. And then instead of fixing the problem, you are actually introducing another problems, right? So yeah, just go easy. And then another thing that I would caution you is that I think I told you earlier that my background is in science, but life science, but I'm also, my a part of my background is in IT. So, another thing that I would caution you is that, just don't believe anything that you read on the internet. Always take it with a grain of salt. And then, always try to vet the source of the information, and then see how reliable that is. And then if it's reliable, like I said, just think and listen to your body, and then, decide how much of this new, a regimen that you are going to try. If you just go overboard all of a sudden, then it just, knocks everything out of balance. So I would just go easy, and then keep listening to the body, and then, make changes as you go along.
That's really good advice. Yeah, I think younger people like myself tend to be gung ho, and maybe we can get away with a lot. But yesterday, I just learned about. I've been studying B vitamins very intensely. Thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, B5, B6, B12, B9, and I recently learned if you can't remember your dreams, that could be a B6 deficiency. Um, but if you take too much B6, I think that can cause like neuropathy. So there's a sweet spot, like a balance.
That's a good point. So yeah, just first of all, yeah, always vet your source, and then just and then try to figure out if it's how important it is, because remembering your dream, how important is that, right? So I don't remember the dreams. Like every night I'm pretty sure I'm dreaming, but by the time I wake up, I don't. Most of the times I don't remember things that I was dreaming. But that's just one example. But if you have some other conditions, and then you start going gun ho, and then it causes another problems. Is that a good thing? Is that a good trade-off? You have to think about that. And another thing you just mentioned, yes, younger people, yeah, there's a wider tolerance, so that's good. But older people, you just have to yeah, be mindful even more than young people. I remember, when I was, in college, I would study all night long, especially before the exam, right? And then I would order pizza, right, Domino's, and then have it delivered to the dorm room, wherever I was studying, and then I would just eat the entire pizza, like it was nothing. But I can't do that now, right? I'm in my 50s now, and I cannot do that now. So yeah, you have to listen to your body, and then yeah, decide the course of action.
Kind of a random question for you, Gon. I heard this, I think in an enzyme interview or from an enzyme advocate years ago, and I forget if I've asked you this in the past. Snake venom. Let's say hypothetically, I'm on a hike in Southern California, and a Southern Pacific rattlesnake lashes out and nails me in the leg. So say hypothetically, I have in my bag a bottle of systemic enzymes or digestive enzymes. Would taking a bunch of those potentially help with that protein, which the venom is a protein? That was kind of the argument that I heard a few times.
I doubt it. I seriously doubt that because for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you take systemic enzymes, right? Systemic enzymes is something you don't just inject it directly into your blood vessels. You have to take it orally. And like I said, it has to go through the stomach and then it has to go into the small intestine where it gets absorbed, right? And then it gets into your bloodstream and then it gets to the site of irritation. So that just takes way too long for the to do something about the snake venom, right? Another thing is that snake venom, yes, it may be protein. I'm not sure exactly what constitutes a snake venom, but just because you take systemic enzymes, systemic enzymes just doesn't work on any proteins. It works on, in this case, when we say systemic enzymes, when enzymes, people say systemic enzymes, we're talking about fibrinogen, something that digests fibrolytic enzymes, right? So something that digests fibrin, right? So unless snake venom, the major constituent of snake venom is fibrin, I don't think it's gonna, systemic enzymes is not gonna do anything.
Now I'm curious to
So
look
for
that up. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I found a study. Swenson, 2005. Snake venoms contain a number of serine and metalloproteinases, and included among these are the fibrinolytic proteinases. So maybe.
Well, so you're saying that snake venom contains fibrolytic enzymes, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because yes, it does make sense for them to contain fibrolytic enzymes. So because they want to give as much damage as possible, right? So it wants to break down fibrins, inside your body to make
Oh, I
the
see.
snake venom more effective.
Hmm.
So, in other words, you're taking systemic enzymes, which is the fibrolytic enzymes, and what you're saying is that snake venom also contains fibrolytic enzymes.
Interesting.
So, if anything, yeah, it worsens the condition. But like I said, it's not going to do anything because it just takes way too long for systemic enzymes to get into the bloodstream.
Probably better to just
So by that
contain.
time, you should be
Probably just carry some antivenom. Probably be better off.
exactly, yes.
I heard that stuff's
And like I
expensive,
said,
but
you have to.
yeah, yeah.
When it comes to systemic enzymes, you have to have patience. It's not like many of these Western medications. It takes time. So it takes days days or weeks before you start to feel the effectiveness of systemic enzymes, and it might take years before that whatever the condition ailment that you're suffering from is gone. So yeah,
Mm,
just be patient. Patience
mm.
is yeah. You have to take systemic enzymes with patience.
I love it. Um, God, do you want to talk about probiotics for a little bit? Because you studied spore
Well,
forming organisms for a while, right?
yes.
And these are different from
So
your run of the mill probiotics, correct?
well, yes, in a way. Probiotics, they're living organisms, and what makes spore formers unique is that these certain kinds of um, um, probiotics, okay, they can form uh, a protein coating around the DNA to protect themselves from harsh environment. So, for example, no food, no water, they can survive that. So that's just a quick overview, like a really, really quick overview of what the spore former is. It just helps these microbes survive for an extended period of time. And we're talking about years and decades. A little more specifically, what happens is that some bacteria, which is what the microbes are, bacteria, um, for example, like a bacillus genus, right? What happens is that, they are living organisms with DNA, right? When the condition for living becomes hard, like there's no water around them, there's no food around them, they can no longer survive, right? So many probiotics, they just die at that point because there's no food, there's no water, they just die. What spore formers can do is they start wrapping their DNA, which is in cytoplasm, inside the body, right, inside the cell. They start wrapping DNA with protein coating, right, and they shed the rest of the cell. So good analogy is a plant seed, right? If you have a plant seed, you store it in your drawer, like a desk drawer. You can keep it in there for like years and years and years. And they don't really die. It just stays dormant, right? This plant seed. The same thing with the spore-forming probiotics. They form a seed, essentially, and they protect the DNA inside this protein sac, right? And they remain in that condition for an extended period of time. Now, when the condition becomes favorable for sustaining the growth, so for example, when you ingest it, for example, right? And then it goes into your stomach and it goes into your small intestine where it's warm, there's moisture, there's food, this seed, regerminates. So this DNA starts to create the rest of the body, right? DNA, of course, as everybody knows, is like a sort of like a blueprint of life and blueprint of your body. So same thing with the probiotics. This blueprint, as long as this spore-forming probiotics, they have a blueprint, which is DNA. As long as they have that DNA intact, they can build the rest of the body from that DNA and then come back to life. Just like the seed that you had in your drawer, you take it, put it in the soil and then pour some water on it, it starts to regerminate, right? It becomes a flower again. Same thing happens with probiotics. It comes back to life. And only some probiotics can do that. Yeah, only some probiotics, not all of them can do it. Only if they have abilities to do that. So for example, a good analogy is that, as humans, we cannot fly, right? Because we don't have wings. But, birds have wings, because they have birds have genes for wings, right? But humans do not. So that's the difference. Some probiotics have certain characteristics that is necessary to build the special coating around their DNA. And that's why they can form spores, whereas some other most other probiotics, they don't have that, characteristics and they cannot form spores. So when the condition becomes harsh, they just simply die.
Wow, that was awesome. I appreciate that explanation. And some of these types of bacteria can actually have antibiotic-like effects, right? Like actually fight infections in the gut.
I would say so. I'm not sure if I would call it antibiotics, but but yes, because they have to compete. The interesting thing is that your body, your intestine is, especially large intestine, is teeming with bacteria, right? And some people say that there are more bacterial cells than the cells of your body. So that's how many bacterial cells there are, and they're always competing for that space, right? In this case, in large intestine, they're competing for the lining of the large intestine, right? They're always like, it's kind of like living in New York City. The real estate is comes with price. If you cannot find a place where you can latch onto on the surface, what happens is that you get expelled from the body. So you have to latch onto the surface of the intestine, and then there's always a competition. So you keep taking good bacteria, probiotics, right? And then you keep taking probiotics, which is beneficial for you, and then they compete against bad bacteria that are living in your gut, and then eventually they have to slough off. They have to come off, And then, as soon as they come off, these good bacteria can take its place, and slowly and gradually replace bad bacteria or yeast, out of place, and then, replace the bad ones with good ones.
Awesome. Do you recommend taking spore forming organisms with food, like these types of probiotics with food, or on an empty stomach? Does it matter?
There are two schools of thoughts about that. I personally like to take it on an empty stomach. So I often take it with systemic enzymes, right? I take probiotics and systemic enzymes together on an empty stomach. Like the first thing I wake up in the morning, and in the evening hours before, like well before the supper time. But there is another school of thought that some people say, hey, you should take it with food. Their idea is that food helps, carry probiotics all the way down to the large intestine. Remember, like small intestine is a very, very long organ, a few meters long, right? So, probiotics, after you ingest on an empty stomach, for example, right? It passes through the stomach, and then it gets deposited into the beginning of the small intestine. And from that point, it has to travel all the way through the small intestine, all the way to the large intestine, right? So the second school of thought, the people think that, by taking food, what happens is that food helps, just, catch them along the way, and then, carries that all the way to the large intestine. Personally, I don't, subscribe to that idea. I just take it with the on an empty stomach, and then, let water carry it all the way down to the large intestine. That's how I do things. Another thing about taking with the food, especially if you're eating, with the protein-rich food, what happens is that stomach can remain closed for up to 2 hours while the protein is getting digested. And as we were discussing earlier, protein, it's kind of like a rolled up ball of string, right? So the stomach acid first unravels that ball, and then your digestive enzymes start, chewing the string to digest. Now that can take a long time. So if you're taking a protein-rich food, like say, for example, you just ate a steak, right? Your stomach can remain closed for up to 2 hours. And then if you are taking probiotics with that steak, right, your probiotics is going to get stuck in the stomach for up to 2 hours, floating around in that stomach acid. So I just don't think it's a good thing. If you're interested in taking probiotics, and that's why I take it on an empty stomach. If you want to take the benefit of like two, schools of thoughts, the good parts of two schools of thoughts, then I would recommend taking probiotics like 5-10 minutes before you eat. Let the capsule go into the small intestine and then start eating, and then eventually that food will pick up the probiotics that's sitting in the small intestine and carry it all the way to the large intestine.
That's fascinating. Wow. Appreciate that. Do you want to go through some questions here, Gan? We have quite a few.
Sure.
Picked out some good ones. This is a common one. Should you take a break from enzymes? Like, does our body become dependent on them and start secreting less? I think that's a common concern.
Yes, I've heard that question too, and I'm not worried about it. I've been taking digestive enzymes. Are we talking about digestive enzymes or systemic enzymes? Digestive enzymes, right?
It must be. Yeah, they didn't specify, but we could just say digestive, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I've been taking digestive enzymes with every single meal that I eat, except for that little light snack that I sometimes eat in the morning. Then I don't take digestive enzymes. But for lunch and supper, I always take digestive enzymes. And I have had no problem. Sometimes I forget to take digestive enzymes, especially I'm on the road, and then nothing bad happens. Listen, your body is already programmed to produce digestive enzymes. So it's not going to just go away. Your body's not going to just forget how to produce digestive enzymes. I sometimes, give an example, analogy of somebody working out in the gym, right? You're lifting a heavy weight. And yes, your body can handle that weight, right? But by having a spotter, helping you, it's easier for you, right? But when that spotter is gone, you can still lift that weight. It's not like your muscle just atrophies and then, forgets how to lift up the weight. It's always there. Your ability to produce enzymes is always there. You don't forget. So that's not something that I would really worry about. And then I know for the first hand that, nothing bad will happen. And, because I've been taking digestive enzymes for, let's see, probably 7 years. I've been taking digestive enzymes every day. And then, I feel great.
That's awesome. And do you take it right before a meal or during or after?
I take it, no, I take it with the meal as I start eating. So some bottles, if you look at it, it says like take it 5 minutes before you start eating. Don't worry too much about that. Just take it as you take your first bite. Before you start eating, a lot of people just take a sip of water, right, or drink. Just take one capsule of digestive enzymes with that sip of water or juice, and then start eating. Now, if you forget to take digestive enzymes, right, like sometimes I do, just take it later. Like I said, especially if you're eating a protein-rich food, your stomach remains closed for a while. So it's not like, there's a window, where you can take digestive enzymes. Don't worry about it. After you finish eating and you suddenly remember that you had forgotten to take digestive enzymes, then just take one capsule and that's it. It'll catch up to the food inside your stomach and then start digesting the food in the stomach. Not a problem.
That's great. SIBO, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Have you ever looked into that?
Yeah. Well, kind of, yes. That's when the your probiotics and the other bacteria, they're supposed to be in the large intestine, but sometimes for some reasons they back up into a small intestine and then start growing there. So that's what the SIBO is.
Have you heard the spore-based probiotics helping with that?
Well, like I said, spore-forming bacteria, the only difference between spore-forming and non-spore forming is that its ability to produce spores. So, I don't think spore-forming bacteria, like, by its nature, can just help SIBO. If anything, if you have SIBO for some reason, whether you take spore forming or non-spore forming, I think you will get SIBO. So, you just have to address the root cause of that.
Yeah, if I had SIBO, I would look into rectal ozone insufflation. Basically, it's like an ozone gas enema. It sounds intimidating, but that's incredible for intestinal problems.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a question here: animal-based enzymes versus plant enzymes. I think the first research was done on animal enzymes, wasn't it?
Well, yes, I think you're right. And then I'm pretty sure that person asking that question is asking about digestive enzymes. Like if you have something like pancreatic enzymes, right? There's a reason why it's released into duodenum. Pancreas, the content of the well, not I shouldn't say content of the pancreas, but the enzymes produced by pancreas, it is released into duodenum where the pH level returns to neutral, right after the low stomach acid, right? And the reason for that is because pancreatic enzymes, they work optimally at neutral pH, right, at 7. So if you take pancreatic enzymes, right, orally to help with digestions, what happens is that it might get stuck, especially if you eat it with food, um, inside the stomach where the pH is low, whereas the pancreatic enzymes are not designed to tolerate that kind of low pH. So a lot of pancreatic enzymes, they come from pigs, and you take it, and then the pH drops inside the stomach, and then it destroys the pancreatic enzymes in the stomach. So by the time it gets into the small intestine, it becomes, the effect is very, very low. And that's why when you look at these pancreatic enzymes, the bottles, you probably have to take a whole bunch of it, right? Like 10 capsules, for example. And then, the reason for that is because you're hoping that some of that survives the low stomach acid, goes into the small intestine where it works. Now, plant-based enzymes or microbial-based enzymes, they have a much, much wider pH tolerance. And a lot of times what happens is that not only do they tolerate pH, low pH, but they actually function at low pH as well. So if you take lipase, okay, which is from bacteria, right, microbial-based lipase. If you take microbial-based lipase, eat it with food, what happens is that it gets trapped in the stomach, but it doesn't get dissolved because, this microbial-based enzymes have a wider pH tolerance. It can tolerate low pH of your stomach. And not only that, it actually works on the fat. So like I said, like you eat steak, and which has like fat, right? The great thing about this is that microbial-based lipase that you eat with the food starts working inside your stomach. So it has like a good 1 hour or maybe 2 hours head start on digestion. And then once it gets into the small intestine, it keeps on working because it's got a wide pH tolerance, and then it functions within a wider range of pH. So it even functions at the neutral pH. So it keeps working in your small intestine. It keeps digesting fat inside your small intestine. So, that's why I typically recommend microbial or plant-based enzymes over animal-based enzymes.
That was awesome. I think we've talked about this in the past, but biofilms, can systemic enzymes help to break down biofilms?
I think so. Biofilms, the constituent of biofilms is like a lot of things. It's essentially some like a structure where bacteria can grow in 3 dimensions. As you can imagine, bacteria, they're so small, and then they sort of spread sideways, right, as they divide and multiply. But if they have biofilm, they can sort of grow in 3-dimensional directions. And then the constituent of biofilms can be a lot of things. The bacteria just produces these things based on whatever they can find. Whatever they can scavenge from their environment, and some of them are just proteins, sugar molecules, and some of them like a DNA, like a disposed DNA materials that they can find. So it can be a lot of things, and fibrin is, of course, one of them that they can just incorporate into biofilms. So in that sense, if you're taking, systemic enzymes, yes, it can definitely digest, part of that biofilm, making it, weaker. But, like I said, that's not the only thing that a biofilm is made of. So it only helps partially.
That's great. So maybe you're like breaching the fortress, but maybe not taking down the whole castle.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. Should people with low blood pressure avoid systemic enzymes? A few questions on that.
Well, that's like whenever you have a condition like that, first I would ask the doctor, consult the doctor, and make sure, because he's the person with, well, he or she is the person with the knowledge of your body and what kind of medications you're taking, and then how these medications interact with each other. And like I said earlier, they probably don't really interact with enzymes, but still, it's better to speak with them. And then it really depends on the cause of that low blood pressure. So I cannot just say, hey, go for it. That would be kind of unprofessional, and then irresponsible of me to say something like that. But like I said, enzymes, these are natural product molecules. They're pretty well tolerated by many people. So, if you are interested, just give it a try. And like I said, don't go gung-ho and then, take a whole bunch of these things, but go easy and see what happens, and keep listening to your body. And then, if something bad happens, just stop doing it. But if nothing bad happens, just, keep doing it. But remember, just ask your doctor first. That's probably the safest thing to do.
Just a few more here, Gan. Are most supplemental digestive enzymes derived from bacteria and fungus? Like if we're talking about the plant enzymes versus the animal enzymes, I think some people freak out the sourcing of enzymes, that it's, derived from mold or whatever.
Well, I think most of the enzymes today are derived microbially, because it's more economical. That's the reason why you can get these enzymes, and sometimes life-saving enzymes, at very, very low price. Because microbes, it's easy to produce them and easy to have them produce enzymes. So that's why a lot of them are microbial based. However, yes, I do understand the concern. Like when you hear bacteria or mold or fungi, it's scary. It sounds scary, but you just have to remember that enzymes are very, very, very small molecules compared to even bacteria. Okay, bacteria is very, very small compared to mold, but enzymes are much, much smaller. So sometimes, when I tell a story like this, think about the like I'm sure everybody has seen soccer, right? Or as they say, football in the rest of the world. There's a goal post, right? And then you kick a ball, and the ball doesn't go through the goal post, right? The net. So imagine bacteria that size, the ball of the size of the soccer ball, right? Enzymes, okay, the width of the enzymes at that scale is probably about the width of your hair, maybe a couple of hair, right? So it's that small. So it can easily pass through the net. Okay, so far so good, right? It's I hope it's kind of easy to visualize that picture. The ball gets stuck in the at the back of the goal post, whereas something as small as the couple of strands of hair, it can easily pass through the net. A lot of times when they produce enzymes, microbial-based enzymes. So when I say microbial, I'm talking about bacteria and fungi, right? They use filters to isolate enzymes. And the filter in this case is kind of like the net, right? And the microbes in this case is kind of like that soccer ball. So soccer ball gets trapped in the net, whereas the enzymes, since they're so small, it can easily pass through that filter. So that's how they isolate enzymes from bacteria or yeast or mold, fungi. So there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing that even remotely resembles bacteria or fungi in a capsule of enzymes because of the sheer, like a huge size difference.
Here's one more here from my friend Pedro. This is a complex one. Anything on the role of transposons?
You saved the big one for the last.
Anything on the role of transposons?
Let's have it. Go ahead.
Transposons and enzymology. Any connection there? So I think he's talking about translocation of DNA.
Oh, one of those. I would not worry about that. Some people ask questions about that, and this is kind of related to telomerase that people sometimes talk about. People say, "Oh, I take telomerase to extend my life," and I just don't believe something like that happens. One of the reasons is that first of all, you take enzymes. Okay, it needs to get absorbed into your bloodstream, and then it goes to the site, and then it goes, it digests the fibrin. Okay, in this case, we're talking about systemic enzymes, and we're talking about fibrolytic systemic enzymes. So it breaks down fibrin. Now, in order for that to do anything to your DNA, it would first have to cross the cell membrane, right? And then it has to travel inside the cytoplasm. And then it has to go all the way to the nucleus in case of humans, right? Unlike bacteria, which, where they have DNA just floating around in the cytoplasm freely, humans and, like animals, they have a nucleus. So that's another membrane that, the enzymes need to pass through to get inside. And then what? It's not going to just start chewing on the DNA and then start breaking up DNA. So that's not something that I would worry about. It just doesn't get there in the first place. And then even if it does get there for some weird reasons, that's not the right substrate that these systemic enzymes work on. So nothing would happen.
Mm, that's great. And this is a different discussion from like GMOs, right? Like genetically modified organisms. Because I've heard some fascinating arguments on those that they aren't as big of a deal as the natural health community makes them out to be. Not to say we shouldn't think about them, but I've heard even like just probiotics can help to counter them. I haven't looked into it too deeply, but
Well, yeah, GMO. I'm not too worried about that. I know it's a hype. Remember, what was that? Like people, with celiac disease, which is an actual, condition, right? A lot of people had celiac disease, and then people couldn't digest wheat. And then what happens is that, people just heard about it, and then people just started going crazy about it. And then, next thing you know, everybody's having this gluten digesting problems. I've got gluten digesting problems, and I have to find food at gluten sections. And what happens is like, a lot of superstores, they started having this special section for gluten-free food. I don't know if you remember it, but some retail, superstores, supermarkets started having the special sections. But you don't see that anymore, and then it's just a marketing thing. And like I said, like a celiac disease, that's a real thing. That's the actual condition. But a lot of people, for like normal healthy people, they hear these like terms and then they just go crazy with it. So GMO is another thing. I'm not too worried about it. Same thing with organic food. I'm not too worried about that. I'm not searching for organic food per se. But GMOs. What happens is that yes, it's genetically modified. Yes, but the food is still food, and then the components of that genetically modified food is still the same. If you look at the building blocks, so proteins are made out of amino acids. DNA is a nucleotides, and the fat is made of the some carbons molecules. So, and the fatty acid. But what happens is that when you break them up, into their constituents, they're all the same. So I'm not too worried about it. And the last thing I like to mention is the organic food. The only time that I'm interested in organic food, that I'm really interested in eating organic food, is that the fact that they don't use pesticides, those things that you just don't want to consume. So in that respect, yes, organic food, yes, that's good. But I trust the safety of the the food produced or brought into the United States. This is really, one of the countries, with very, very high standards of the food that people eat. So I'm not too worried about for like non-GMO or non-organic food, consuming those food. But like I said, I understand that some people like organic food for its, added safety. So I do understand that. GMO, I'm not too worried about it. And yeah, but when you look at the other food, like, when I first came to the United States, I was kind of surprised with the food colorings of the, in the processed food. So I would go into the supermarkets and then I would, look at, for example, cereal aisle, right? I was so, surprised with the colorings, the food colorings. And then I go to like, like confections, other confections, like candies and cakes. And I was like surprised with this, like a brilliant blue or red or yellow colors, and people actually consuming these things. So, that's something I would worry more about than, spending time worrying about GMOs.
That's great. Yeah, hopefully you draw the line at lab grown meats. I think that can't be good, where they're like growing meat in a petri dish. And
I'm a scientist, so every science, it has to start somewhere. So, at the moment, no, I would not eat that lab-grown meat. But I'm pretty sure in the future they perfect the technology to the point that you cannot distinguish between the lab-grown meat and the regular, like real animal meat. I'm pretty sure someday it'll be like that.
Fortunately, I have a ton of deer every day. I see them running through the forest up here.
Yeah, deer and moose, right? Yes, you told me that.
Awesome, Gan. Well, this was so much fun. I learned so much and really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. I've always enjoyed talking with you over the years about enzymes. It's a lot of fun.
Likewise, it's always fun speaking with you. You're very knowledgeable, and I respect the fact that you're still very young, and then you have your own business, and I wish you luck going forward. And thank you for having me on this show.
Thanks, Gan. Cool. Well, stick around as I close it out. Thanks so much. That's it for today's show. I thought the snake venom part was fascinating because when I was raw vegan for several years, there were enzyme advocates running around saying that you could save your life by taking tons of enzymes if you get bit by a venomous snake. I always questioned it. I never looked into it, and they never specified whether they were referring to digestive enzymes or systemic enzymes. But this sent me down a rabbit hole, and I found that really interesting study from 2005, snake venom, fibrinogen, olytic enzymes. And this study is looking at the potential pharmaceutical use of snake venom for vascular occlusive conditions. Could call that blocked arteries. I would rather use vitamin K2, magnesium, shilajit, or the number one being serrapeptase and nattokinase systemic enzyme therapy before going to snake venom. But it's interesting what Gan said, that taking enzymes could actually make your situation worse. So hopefully that part saved a former raw vegan's life if they were thinking about trying that on a hike. I also liked what he said about the enzymes being derived from bacteria and fungus, and people freak out about that. But the size of the enzymes are so much smaller than the bacteria and fungus that there's not going to be any residue left over from that extraction. There's so much fear that's thrown around in the alternative health sphere, especially with the subject of supplements. With enzymes, I usually hear two arguments. One is they're not worth taking and they don't do much, and there's not much research to back up their efficacy, which is not true. And the second one is that because they're derived from mold or fungus or whatever, that they are harmful to your health, which is also untrue. I've been taking various enzymes for several years, thanks to delving pretty deep into the raw vegan lifestyle. And that's the best thing that I took from it was enzyme therapy, both digestive and systemic. And I could say that taking handfuls, I used to swallow 20, 30, 40 capsules at a time of digestive enzymes, seeing if I could get that systemic enzyme effect. And just taking one or two of a high quality serrapeptase and nattokinase systemic enzyme is so much more effective than taking tons of digestive enzymes. And nobody wants to take handfuls, especially at a time, of capsules. And that's what's so cool about a good quality digestive or systemic enzyme is you should only need one to get the effect. Although because I'm into, call it anti-aging or pro-youthing, I often take at least 3, usually 6 of the Dissolve-It-All from Mitolife. And that's an enteric-coated serrapeptase and nattokinase in a phthalate-free capsule, which is really important because all these systemic enzyme products you'll find at your health food store, the enteric coating on these cheaper supplements is actually made of plastic. So while you're breaking down scar tissue, you're also getting a good dose of plastic. So if anyone wants to connect with Gan, I put his phone number below. And if you want to support the show, you can go to matt-blackburn.com. I have the updated CLF protocol up there, recommended products, which I'm constantly updating. Next show is actually with the people over at the Chi Institute. I've been loving their product called the Infratonic 11 Chi Palm. I learned about this from Brandon Amalani of Shen Blossom. And this is such a great product to use in combination with other things. Like, for example, if you're wearing headphones or you're doing some type of a flashing light thing, your face, whether it's a Lucia light or the new Calm or light therapy, you can place this Chi Palm on your thymus. That's what I do, like the center of my chest. And I put it on the sleep mode. And sometimes I'll just take a little power nap with that over my thymus gland. And it feels really rejuvenative. And the battery lasts forever. So you could take it on the road with you. You could take it traveling. It's really small. And their slogan with it is put it where it hurts. So a lot of people use it for aches and pains. They have pretty amazing stories on their website. It's been used at equestrian centers for wounds in horses, for whiplash, so many cool things. So check that out at the Chi Institute. And that's going to be a really fun show that I'm looking forward to. My brand is Mitolife. You can find that at mitolife.co. And the Shilajit tablets are finally coming back in stock. So just keep checking the website, usually 2 to 3 times a week. That's definitely our most popular product for good reason. It takes a lot to import that from Russia, especially with the recent world events going on. It was very hard to get that out of the country to the US, but we finally did it. And they're very powerful tablets. I take 5 a day with my raw goat milk, usually with breakfast, sometimes with lunch. And it's a really powerful synergy to have Shilajit together with goat milk and coffee or caffeine. If you want to be productive, if you want to be creative, get some writing done or study and research, it's a really great combination that I recommend. And then you just keep adding things to it if you want. I like to add the magnesium Mag ATP product to that as well. and it's just a really balancing combination. And I just want to give a shout out here to the quote vitamin D debate. I recently wrote a post, kind of a rebuttal post to this back and forth that's happening with the quote pro-metabolic community and what I've been sharing for the last few years against supplementing isolated vitamin D3 or serosteroid hormone D or cholecalciferol. I recommend getting it from light, either from an ultraviolet light device or from food, or from a food-based supplement, which would be Rosita cod liver oil, which does contain vitamin D, but it also contains vitamin A at a ratio of 10 to 1, A to D. And what's really fascinating is that retinoids derived from retinol actually inhibit calcification. So if you take isolated by itself vitamin D, you will increase calcium absorption in the gut. And that will promote calcification because everyone's drinking Mountain Valley spring water and Gerolsteiner and all of these hard waters. We've been slammed with calcium for our entire life. And the natural health community is still heavily promoting it, largely via drinking water, unfiltered drinking water, like spring waters or mineral waters. And this adds up. Perrier is another one. You don't just pee it out. It actually gets stuck in your body, especially in a state of magnesium and vitamin K2 deficiency, which are two of the key players in calcium homeostasis and regulating calcium. You need magnesium and vitamin K2 to do that. But vitamin D will also deplete your potassium. It'll deplete your retinol. It'll deplete copper. It depletes so many things. And so if you're going to play the isolate game, like most people the last 2 years that have been taking vitamin D for the thing, how many of them have sufficient retinol status or sufficient red blood cell magnesium levels or enough vitamin K2? They're aware of all of these things. And vitamin E. All the fat-soluble vitamins work together. And so if someone's taking just D and they're vitamin A, vitamin E, and vitamin K2 deficient, they're going to cause metabolic chaos throughout their body. So I think there's nothing wrong with supplementing synthetics. There's nothing wrong with supplementing isolates, but we have to be smart and we have to look at it in context of how we grew up, what foods we ate our entire childhood, what diets we've been on, what supplement regimes we've done. And all of this plays a role in what supplements we should take today. And that's how I crafted the supplements that I sell through Mitolife, is looking at the standard American lifestyle of iron fortification that started in 1941 and the vegetable oils that started shortly thereafter, and all of these poisonings that just kept stacking on. What that depleted and what that caused, it caused a lot of calcification, scar tissue, and iron overload / lipofuscin. And that's the basis of my CLF protocol and the Mitolife supplements that are just tools to assist in your journey of coming back to balance. So that's it. Thanks for listening. Check out the Mitolife Academy on YouTube. It's 4 private videos every month and a live Q&A the last day of the month. And there's a new radio show released every Friday. See you next week. Stay supercharged.